Welcome to a thrilling episode of Mac Music Review. It's nice and windy, and I'm sitting in my chair, and today we're looking at the best albums of the decade. Let's go. This is a completely objective list. It's all the albums that are literally the best of the decade. Anything that you might think should be on this list, you're probably wrong. There are albums that I probably did leave out that actually are pretty good, because I didn't want to have like a super long honorable mentions list. This is the top 15 albums of the decade, as the title of this video suggests. But I'm also going to be going over some honorable mentions, and I have a good amount of honorable mentions, but there could definitely be more. If you guys want to tell me what your favorite albums of the decade are, I would love to hear what you have to say, and I would love to listen to them. Especially if it's something I haven't heard before. Please do share. But without further ado, here's the list. And, here's the honorable mentions, I should say, because we're going to start with the honorable mentions. My first honorable mention, my first album that I think you guys should definitely listen to, a really great album that came out this decade, is Kids See Ghosts. By Kids See Ghosts. Kids See Ghosts is the duo of Kanye West and Kid Cudi. Kanye West, one of the most legendary rappers ever to exist. One of the most legendary producers. His production is just so good. He and Kid Cudi really complement each other very well, with Kid Cudi doing a lot of... His voice is really unique and really special, and his voice is just used to the fullest extent on this album. And Kanye raps some verses, and some of the verses he raps on here are some of his best ever. I mean, really, really a great project. I don't love Pusha T's verse on the first song, and I don't love the song Fourth Dimension. Besides that, this is a really fantastic album. My next honorable mention, and the only Christian album, the only worship album on this entire list, the only Christian contemporary music / worship album on this list, is Becoming Who We Are by King's Kaleidoscope. This is a groundbreaking worship album. Lyrically, it's incredibly bold. It's incredibly passionate. The vocals and the lyrics on this thing are incredibly passionate. This is someone who really cares about, who really cares about his faith. Someone who really cares about what he believes in. And it just shows through on almost every single track on this album. The only reason this album is not in the top 15 is I do not think it's a perfect album. I don't love all the songs on this thing. But then again, this album does have some fantastic songs. Felix Culpa, it's great. It's a great album. The next album on my list is Psychodrama by Dave. And by the way, I apologize for the noise. I have siblings who are doing stuff in the yard, and they're dumb and annoying, as all siblings are. Anyway, this next album, Psychodrama by Dave, is an honorable mention. This is not an easy album to listen to. It's also one of the most rewarding albums to listen to, because it starts in one place, if you listen to the song Psycho, and then you have all the stuff in the middle, and then it ends on drama, and it takes you through this journey, and by the time you get to the end, you're in a completely different place from where you started. And it's honestly powerful. This is a powerful album. The reason it's not on the top 15 is because there are songs on here that are not good. The song Voices and the song, there are a few songs on this thing which really are just not great, but it is an extremely powerful album. Another very powerful album, the next honorable mention I want to talk about, is Ghosteen by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. This is actually the highest rated album of the decade, according to Metacritic, which Metacritic compiles the scores of a bunch of different critics. It had over 20 critics, I think, 17. I think it was over 20 critics. And this was overall, on average, the highest rated album of the decade. And honestly, I can see why, but I personally think the album was a little bit too long. Still, fantastic songwriting, fantastic singing, fantastic music. It really is a fantastic album. Blonde by Frank Ocean is Pitchfork's album of the decade, and I think one of the best albums of the decade. Even though I personally am not a Frank Ocean fan, and I haven't really listened to it, it's also the only R&B album on my entire list. I never really cared for this. I can listen to, literally, I've listened to this album in bits and pieces, and what I've heard is amazing. Every single snippet of this album, every musically, vocally, this thing is just amazing. I'm not a fan of all of the lyrical content, though. Besides that, honestly, a phenomenal sounding album, and one of the best album closers I've ever heard, ever. Futura Free is legendary, in my eyes, and so many others' eyes as well. Untitled by Me Without You is my next honorable mention. Spoiler alert, this is not the only Me Without You album on this list. And this is a crazy album. It's really amazing. Just the fact this album doesn't have a name, and the fact this album ends on a song called Break On Through to the Other Side Part 2, like a sequel to the Doors song. It's like, what? But this album, lyrically, musically, vocally, is very powerful. It's extremely complex. It really captures the essence of chaos in the form of an album, with chaos, but also it's also like a hurricane. There's just everything's crashing around you, everything's being destroyed, and then there are moments of peace in between all the crashing and the banging cymbals, and honestly, it's an amazing album. Vessel by 21 Pilots. This is the fan favorite 21 Pilots album. Like, out of all the 21 Pilots albums, this is the one that fans love the most. This one and Regional at Best are like the two fan favorites. And I've never really listened to Regional at Best, but I love Vessel. Vessel is full of some really fantastic songs. Guns for Hands, Semi-Automatic, Car Radio, Trees, Holding On to You. Literally so many songs. And if you get this album on CD, it actually has extra songs. It's like a deluxe version that you can only listen to on the CD form, because they don't have it like digitally. If you listen to it on Amazon or iTunes or Spotify, they don't even have the last few songs. So totally buy this one on CD. You will not regret it. It is amazing. Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves won the Album of the Year in the Best Album of 2018 at the Grammys, and it's not hard to see why. This album is basically beauty in the form of music. It's super elegant, amazing vocals, amazing music. Lyrically, it's not 100%, which is why I'm not putting this in the top 15. It does have some misfires here and there in terms of the lyrics, but not a lot. This is a pretty fantastic album. Honestly, check out Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves. It's honestly amazing. Man, it's really windy today. Alright, this is my last honorable mention, and it's Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. All these people, man, this is the best Tyler, the Creator album. Metacritic and Pitchfork agree this is the best Tyler, the Creator album, not Igor. There are people, Needle Drop says Igor is better. I don't understand. I have a manager at work who says that Igor is better. I do not understand. I mean, I wasn't a Tyler, the Creator fan until Igor. I didn't listen to Tyler, the Creator until Igor. But then I went back and listened to Flower Boy, and it's definitely better. Igor's a great album. This is an amazing album. Just saying, one of the best albums of the decade. It's great. Now, we are finally in it. Number 15, The Suburbs by Arcade Fire. This album, I apologize for the wind being so loud, man. You got my siblings, you got the wind. Everything just wants this video to not work out today. Right at the turn of the decade, you had The Suburbs by an already legendary indie rock group, Arcade Fire. Legendary for Funeral and for Neon Bible. Both were considered to be amazing albums. Then The Suburbs came out and just took everyone by storm with just how amazing it was. I mean, track for track. There are a few songs on this thing which I don't think are amazing, but generally speaking, the lyrical content of this album, the vocal content, and just the music on this thing just sounds fantastic. This is an album that has aged phenomenally since, 9 years ago it was released, and it's still honestly amazing. Number 14, All Things Bright and Beautiful by Owl City. This is the best Owl City album. I mean, honestly, like, it's not his most popular album, and this one, critics, this is one of the most underrated albums ever made of all time, in my opinion. Critics bashed this album. They didn't. Owl City lives in his own world, and people don't understand that. He lives in a world where everything is flowers, and bears talk, and the woods sing, like trees sing, and like, he lives in a weird Disney fantasy magical world. And this album, listening to this album takes you to that world, and it's so much nicer than the world we live in, especially in, 2018, 2019, where everything feels terrible sometimes. This is escapism at its absolute finest. Start with some escapism, then it gets you right back to reality, right back to death. This is Mount Erie, A Crow Looked at Me. This is one of the most harrowing, depressing albums you're ever going to listen to ever. Possibly the most depressing album you'll ever hear in your entire life. It's incredibly written literally like weeks after his wife died. And the songs literally take place, like the setting of the songs is literally like days after his wife died. And he sings about the effects and like seeing remnants of her being alive and constantly being reminded of her by little things around. And it's just, it's grief in the form of music, and it's incredible. It's really, there's not a lot to say about it other than that it's utterly incredible and amazing how he captured grief and bottled it into this album for anyone to hear. Okay, that was dark. Let's dial it back to some Chance the Rapper, a goofy, fun-loving guy with his fantastic album, Coloring Book. This album, I'm baffled by how good this album is. I'm baffled by how he took these features, these terrible artists, like he got his Lil Yachty and like DRAM, and he gets all these artists, Dram or whatever, and he gets all these artists, and he orchestrates a symphony, and Lil Yachty is part of the symphony, and Lil Yachty sounds great. He gets Young Thug. I hate Young Thug, and Young Thug does a good job on this album. This album is amazing. It's honestly just, this is an amazing album. It won the Grammy for Rap Album of the Year, even though it's a mixtape, and I'm so glad it did. It totally deserved it. This is an incredible mixtape album, whatever you want to call it. Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. This was a legendary album. When it came out, it took everybody by storm. It dominated the Grammys. Daft Punk won Best New Artist, they won Best Song, they won Best Album. This is the first time in the Grammys that electronic album, I think, was ever nominated for Best Album. Not only was this album nominated, it won. This was a groundbreaking album. The fusions on this album, the things this album does, have never been done in electronic music. Or it feels like, this album feels insanely, totally original. I think it's the best Daft Punk album. This album is amazing. Next up on this list, this is the best Foster the People album. I can see someone saying that their debut, Torches, was the best. I mean, that is the cover of my YouTube channel. That literally is my YouTube channel icon, is a little character from the album cover of Torches. Like, right in the middle, like the torch head guy. But this album I like better. Lyrically, incredibly profound, incredibly meaningful, especially for the 2010s, talking about consumerism and how superficial and fake everything is. And it's their search for truth in the world full of lies. And musically, it's great. Vocally, you could say it's terrible, but I think he does a fantastic job. His voice is very singular, and I really like it. You might hate it. That's understandable. I love this album. It's amazing. The next album on this list is something that I'm sure you haven't heard of. I know that most people haven't heard of. It's a Humble Beast record. I love Humble Beast. I'm not wearing the hat right now, but I would be if I was reviewing a rap album. I always wear it when I'm reviewing a rap album. This is an album about how broken and crooked the world is. a theme that I really like to hear in music because it's very honest and it's very, I don't know, it just so happens that a lot of people have done it very well, or a few people have tackled this theme very well. Propaganda just did a fantastic job on this album. This has one of the best songs I've ever heard in my entire life. It's Not Working. It's Not Working. It's Not Working is the name of the song. In parentheses, The Truth. One of the most groundbreaking songs, lyrically, musically incredible, vocally incredible. It's a truly amazing song. Truly one of the best songs I've ever heard in my entire life. This is one of the most underrated albums ever made, and it drives me crazy. Needle Drop gave it like a 6. Pitchfork gave it like a 6. AllMusic gave it 3 stars. I don't even understand it. This is Modest Mouse. This is modern Modest Mouse, and they literally haven't lost anything that made them great in the first place on this album. Musically, absolutely incredible. Some of the most creative, cool sounding music ever. Lyrically, 100% Modest Mouse. It's everything you would expect them to be singing about and the way you would expect them to be singing it. Vocally, it sounds great. It sounds like a Modest Mouse album, but with higher quality production because it's more modern and they have more modern tools and it just sounds more polished. It's a more polished sounding Modest Mouse record, and it's absolutely incredible. I do not understand why people do not like this album, because I absolutely love this album. Yeezus is one of the best examples of an artist's creativity I've ever heard in all of music. This is literally Kanye West in his true form. Kanye West has gone Super Saiyan, and this is him. This is the actual, this isn't Super, he hasn't gone Super, this is Kanye West. This is the deepest, darkest side of his brain. Yay, which is the background for my YouTube channel, like the background banner. I love being bipolar. Oh, I hate being bipolar, it's awesome. That's what it is. That's the title, that's what's on that album cover. But this is actually him at his truest. This is Kanye West, completely unrestricted, saying anything he wants, the music being whatever it wants, vocally just him just going crazy. This is an insane album. Pale Horses by Me Without You. This album sought to capture and basically made Revelation, the last book of the Bible, about the end of the world, into a movie that you can watch with your ears. and which sounds weird, but that's totally what it is. It's incredibly dark, cryptic imagery. Every word of this album has some deep meaning. It's super incredibly complex. The song structures are all over the place and don't follow any traditional, it's all crazy. And the last song on this album, Rainbow Signs, is one of the most fantastic endings to an album I've ever heard. It's absolutely heart-stopping. The world basically gets torn apart and then slowly put back together again. And then the album ends. And it's insane. Dang by Kendrick Lamar. This album, if you looked at me and tried to tell me or explain to me that this was the album of the decade, I would not complain with you. I mean, if you told me this was the album of the decade, I would not complain with you at all. Absolutely legendary. Even though some of the songs like Love and Loyalty, I cannot stand Loyalty. I can't even listen to that song. And then the song God and the song Yeah is actually not terrible. People bash the songs God and Yeah. But this album has some terrible songs. It doesn't matter. This album is incredible. Like just everything this album stands for, everything this album means. This album won a Pulitzer Prize. This is the only album outside of classical music to win a Pulitzer Prize. That should tell you everything you need to know about this album. It is truly amazing. If I did not include To Pimp a Butterfly on this list, I don't know what kind of a list it would have been. If you look up 20 best albums of the decade lists, I can guarantee you this would be on every single one of them. Unless it was some list that was like genre specific, like only alternative music, only metal music, bro, only metal albums. No, this would be on every single list. This is one of the highest rated albums ever made on Metacritic. It's literally, I think, in the top 10 highest rated of all time. Of course, Needle Drop gave it a 10. Pitchfork put it in their top 10 albums of the decade. It tells a story, and the story is amazing. It has some of the best songs. It has what I think is one of the best songs ever made of all time, and that is All Right. Also has You and I and King Kunta, and this is a truly amazing album. Another album that I'm positive you have not heard of, unless you like super underground Christian rap and Humble Beast albums, because this is Fly Exam by Jay Givens. The wordplay on Fly Exam is unparalleled. From every album I've ever listened to, I've never heard anything this complex in terms of lyrical content. Musically, it's absolutely excellent. Not perfect. The last song I think is not amazing, and then Lost in Space is not amazing. That's what kept me from giving the album a 10, but it is the absolute closest thing I could give to a 10, or a 5 out of 5 on my channel. Absolutely incredible album. I love this thing, and every single person should listen to it. Number 2, the second best album of the year, The Narrative by Sho Baraka. I absolutely love this album. It is simultaneously, I can't say that word, one of the funniest and most fun and just carefree, enjoyable, fun albums, and one of the most somber and dark and harrowing albums I've ever heard. You will be like laughing and just having a great time. You'll be laughing and dancing in the first half of this album, and very possibly crying and when you get to the last song. And when you really get to the very last song, you're going to be like contemplating life. You're going to be thinking about, I mean, just absolutely incredible what this album can do. This is a perfect album. This is 5 stars out of 5 for me. Number 1 album of the year. Pitchfork gave it a stinking 7.6? What? Dude, so many of these albums on this list coincide like very well with Pitchfork. Like, these are albums that Pitchfork really likes. Some of the albums on this list. But this album Pitchfork didn't care for. I do not understand that. Pure Comedy is a tour of creation. It's a very cynical, snarky tour of Father John Misty saying, and he literally, this is one of the lyrics on the album, he says, let's take a tour of creation's handiwork, of creation, and it's all of the bad parts of it. And it's an album that's the most deeply depressing and dark like I've ever heard. It's also funny, and musically, he chooses to go in the direction of like classical type music, so it's like an orchestra, but at one point there's an Alexa talking to him in the memo, and it comes out of nowhere, and then there's this other part where the music swells and becomes huge and explodes, and another part where he screams like an insane Frank Sinatra, and then it ends with him saying that we're a speck on a speck on a speck, so nothing really matters anyway. And that's it. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you have a great rest of your day.